Hello and welcome to Photographic Connections, the podcast where we create connection to self, nature and others through the art of photography. My name is Kim Grant, the founder of Photographic Connections and your host for this podcast. And today I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Klaus Axelsen onto the podcast. Klaus is a Norwegian-based landscape photographer who loves to create calming images of nature. We speak about how photography and nature helped him to understand mindfulness and give him some relief from his panic attacks, as well as his photographic process and how he loves to go out and connect with nature in a very slow and mindful way, and also how he likes to combine a mix of local photography with a little bit of travel. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Klaus Axelsen. Hi Klaus, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast this week. I'm looking forward to hearing your story and sharing it with our listeners because I love how you use your experiences and almost transmute them emotionally into your photographs. And I think it could be a very inspiring story for people to hear. So before we delve into your actual photographic process, I wondered if you could go way back to the beginning and share the story of what got you into photography in the first place.
Well, I have not been doing photography for that many years, so it actually started in 2015. And I bought a camera originally to take better photos of my family and our shared experiences and stuff like that. But it happened at a time when I also had some need to relax and get a little bit relief from the stress in the everyday life. So I was going more and more out in nature. So I brought with me this camera out on my hikes in my local area, and realized I could actually create quite cool things with it. So I got a little bit hooked, and from there I just continued bringing the camera along, and it sparked my interest in nature and landscape photography. So that's the short story of how I ended up doing this.
Fantastic. And it seems like nature and the landscape specifically was what really interested you during those times. So have you always had a connection with nature, or has photography brought that into your life?
I had it when I was a child, because I grew up in northern Norway, very close to nature, and I was with my family in nature a lot. But then when I started studying and later on working, I forgot about it, and I was totally stressed out with work and didn't have the time to go out as much as I probably should. So it was not until this 2015-16 that I realized that I had missed it, and it was really nice to finally get to visit nature more often.
It's really nice for you to be able to be reconnected with that after the life that you'd been living had kind of taken you away from that connection with nature a little bit. And it's lovely that photography was able to give you that connection back in many respects. And you'd mentioned there that photography was almost like a release from the stresses in life for you. So I wondered if you'd feel comfortable sharing a little bit about these stresses and what they led to for you and how photography helped you with them.
Yeah, I started a business together with a good friend of mine back in 2010 within customer and marketing analytics, and it went well. We had a decent amount of success, and but also quite a few hours in front of a computer, and business development and stress with marketing and everything and sales. So it was really stressful. So after some time, maybe doing a lot too much work, I started to experience panic attacks. And originally, if people don't know what it is, if it feels like you're about to die, the body, the system is breaking down basically. So initially, I thought it was something physical wrong with me. So I had doctors run a lot of tests and stuff like that, but they couldn't find anything wrong. So after some time I realized it was stress-based, actually. So the nervous system was playing games with me, I guess, kicking off the fear sensors where it's not supposed to happen in normal situations. That's not stressful at all. So that led me to realize I had to do some actions to get rid of this, or to control it at least. So I started practicing some mindfulness techniques and meditation and stuff like that. With a decent degree of success, it helped a little bit. But it was not until I started these hikes and going out with my camera that because I was so enthusiastic about photography, I forgot all the worries and all the things I was stressed about the future and planning and business and everything. I was totally in the moment, and that really made everything disappear. So I had some hours out in nature, total no symptoms at all. So that was a big relief, and I understood that this is meditation for me. So it really helped. So that's well, it was fantastic.
I mean, that's an amazing story there, really showcasing how healing photography as a creative outlet and combining that with nature can be for our well-being. And, you know, particularly with this sense of calming us down, of, like you said, there being in that present moment. And it's beautiful that when you were out there with your camera, that it's all, like you said, all your stresses just disappeared. It was such a beautiful way and a natural way for you to find relief from what you were going through. And you'd mentioned there that you began to kind of engage in mindfulness and meditation exercises before combining that with the photography. So where did you first come across this idea of mindfulness?
It was when I did not get a diagnosis. I wasn't physically ill. I started to think what it could be, and several of the doctors that were running the tests, saying I'm perfectly fine, they told me I should probably try to do something to relieve the stress. So then they recommended me some people that could help me learn these mindfulness techniques. So that's the way I started with it. But I found it quite difficult getting the hang of it. So I had some success, but it was better for me to find something where I could be totally engaged, as long as I didn't have to think about I need to perform anything or some end result. I could just do what I like for some hours. That was more effective for me though.
It's interesting because we hear the term mindfulness and also meditation a lot nowadays, and I think a lot of people try and do mindfulness and meditation, but they can't switch off. Whereas I love that you've been able to combine it with the photography, because it's almost like the photography has given you that tool that brings together the mindfulness and the healing elements, but gives you that tool to really implement it and feel the benefits, which I think is really lovely, because I think that's maybe one element that a lot of people are missing. It's like they hear this mindfulness term, but they're like, it just doesn't make sense to me until you're out there. And I think a lot of photographers who have a really deep emotional connection with what they're photographing, particularly when it comes to nature and landscapes, they already feel this mindfulness when they're out there. And I guess going a bit further into that, how do you find that photography helps you to be in that present moment?
Well, it's this interest in photography and also exploring nature. It just keeps me engaged, and then all the stresses I forget about it, and I get totally into the landscape and the details of the nature. So it's kind of just happens when I'm practicing and looking around and exploring.
Yeah, it's natural, isn't it? It's difficult to speak about that for a long time, because when we do this ourselves, it's like it's just natural. We feel it. It's almost like there's no words to describe it, really, is there?
No, it's pretty hard to describe with words, but when you out experience it, you feel it.
Yes, definitely. And the feeling is definitely the important thing here, I feel as well. Why do you think, out of everything in the world that you could have gone and photographed, why do you think it was nature and landscape specifically that enticed your interest in photography?
I guess it's because I grew up very close to nature. So when I was a child, I had many experiences out in nature, along rivers and fishing and going for hikes and everything together with my family. So I guess it was natural for me to, when I was searching for ways to relax and get away from everyday stress, it was natural for me to start hiking and go explore my local areas.
It's interesting, the vast majority of people I've spoken to on this podcast who have got into nature photography, most of them, apart from one or two, have had this deep connection or this experience of spending time in nature when they were a child. And I love that experiences has kind of brought us back, because it's almost like that period of your life when you were running your business and you started having your panic attacks. It's almost like that connection you had as a child to nature wasn't quite there anymore, and you rediscovering that connection is what really helped you to get back to yourself, I feel.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I rediscovered what I needed in a way.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing for anybody listening right now who is maybe struggling with anxiety or panic attacks or something similar. It could sometimes be worth thinking, can't it? You know, what did you love as a child, and what did you have a connection to as a child, and have you lost that connection, and potentially thinking about bringing that back into their life, because I feel there's definitely some overlap between your story and in some ways mine, in the sense that in my early 20s I had panic attacks as well. I was a nurse at the time, which is a very stressful job, a lot of shift work and working at very strange times of day. And I started having really quite dramatic panic attacks that led me to down quite a negative health route, which in the end I gave up nursing for a couple of reasons. But the more I reconnected with nature, which was very prevalent in my childhood, and the more I connected with photography and brought them together, the easier my life became, and the more I could re-engage, I guess cope with life is what I'm trying to say. And it's really nice to hear that you developing that connection for nature again was such a great thing for you, because I think it's a very powerful story to share with the world.
Yeah, it is, and I rediscovered the connection with nature, but the experiences out in nature, exploring with a camera and everything, if you're struggling with panic attack and you get some hours relief from the sources of the attacks or the stress, it impacts the rest of your life as well, positively. So I was functioning much better both at work and at home. So it's a bonus, both interesting and lovely to be out in nature, but it also impacts other parts of my life though.
That's really lovely to hear, because yeah, if we're not coping in many ways, it's nice to, once we find something to help us with that, it definitely we can feel that knock-on effect and everything else, as you've just rightly explained there, which is beautiful. So when you go out with your camera, what is your photographic process? Do you go out with a specific image in mind? Do you go out with a sense of exploration? You know, how do you approach things when you go out there with your camera?
It depends a little bit. If I'm out with my camera in my local areas, I tend to be really open-minded and just grab my camera and see what I can find, that kind of attitude. Of course, sometimes I know where I'm going, so I know what I can find, if it's a woodland or if it's a lake or a river or something like that. But I try to keep an open mind locally. But if I'm traveling, then my approach is a little bit different, because I know I have a limited amount of time at my disposal. So then I do quite intensive research before I go. But I don't have any images in mind before I go. I just want to make sure that I explore the areas with the greatest potential. For example, the last couple of years I've had a project, Artworks of Nature I've called it, where I've explored quite cool rock structures and potholes and details. And when I'm working with that project, I have to do quite extensive research to make sure that when I go to the right places. But while I'm there, my approach is a little bit different, and then I'm trying to not take up my camera and start shooting pictures when I arrive. And that's difficult because I'm really enthusiastic when I come to a new location, so it's easy to just grab the camera and fire off. But at least for me, that doesn't work. I've experienced it a lot of times. I get too exaggerated, so I need to calm down. So I have found techniques that makes me take a coffee, eat something, relax, walk around, and just take in the place to see what I find interesting with the place. And that's the best images that I make is, or at least the images that I'm most satisfied with myself, is when I've taken in the place and found something that really speaks to me and is interesting to work with. And then I can pull out my camera and start to work the scene. Yeah, so that's a little bit about my process.
I love that you shared there that you have to tune into a scene when you go somewhere new, because it is important, isn't it? Because if we do just go on location and start creating images straight away, you miss so much and you don't really get that time to quite understand what it is about that area that really speaks to you personally. And it's lovely that you shared a few tips there of, stopping and taking something to eat, almost, wandering around and really getting to know somewhere, because it almost goes back to your mindfulness and meditative state around photography. If you don't take that time to slow down and be in the present moment, be in the present scene and get to know it, it's very hard to then transmute a scene into imagery.
Yeah, totally agree. So it's kind of self-management when you're at the location. At least for me, it's self-management. I both need to stop and eat. I can take up the phone and try some shots, but don't pull out everything and start shooting immediately.
And you'd mentioned there that you've been doing a project where you've been very drawn to rocks and shapes and potholes. So when you are doing this process of going somewhere new and getting to know the scene and slowing down, do you find there's certain things that speak to you more than others? Is it light? Is it shape? Is it texture? Is it pattern? What things really speak to you?
I've shot a lot of different things, but if I look back on my photographs, I think it would be fair to say that shapes seems to interest me a lot. So quite a few of the shots are shapes, and also quite organic scenes where the elements come together in some kind of harmonious way. Those kind of scenes, I think, at least I'm interested in, and it reflects in many of my photos, I think.
It's always good to be aware of what we're drawn to almost naturally. I've kind of found in my own photographic process that can change over time. I go through periods of being very drawn to shape and then periods of being very drawn to shadows and contrast and light. And it can be a nice changing process as we I guess evolve as photographers as well. Do you find that as well?
Yeah, I totally agree. And when I started out with photography, I was shooting sunrises and sunsets and was really interested in that. I'm still interested in shooting in the good light, but my photography has evolved quite a lot. So I'm not that... I don't need to shoot during the golden hour, for example, anymore. I can find interesting stuff, especially these rock scenes. They're really... I like to shoot them at overcast days.
Yeah.
Where the clouds works like a big softbox and creating even light, and it works nice with this type of scenes.
It's interesting that you mentioned there that you were, initially when you got into photography, you photographed a lot of sunrises and sunsets. I think I almost feel like there's a misconception in the photography world, specifically landscape photography, where when we begin, we're almost led to believe that golden hours is like the time we have to be out there. And then as we evolve, we begin to realise that any time of day can make good images if we're in the right place and we choose the right subject matter. And did you, I guess, feel in the beginning, did you have this almost like concept in your mind that you had to photograph around golden hour? Or was that just something you naturally felt drawn to at the time?
No, I had it exactly as you say. I was even having fear of missing out when I saw a fantastic sunrise or sunset and couldn't go out. So I was totally into that. And yeah.
We've all been there.
Yeah, I think so.
So how do feeling and emotion play a part in creation of your images? Because I know that's something you really think about when before you press the shutter button, you're really thinking about how you're feeling in that moment so that you can really put that into your imagery. So yeah, how do you go about with that process?
Well, I think it's more the approach when I'm at the location. It's this exploring of the scene to find and take time to understand what part of this scene or this place speaks to me and what interests me, and I believe that's the way I can bring my feeling of the place through in a photo. I'm not sure I'm succeeding with it, but at least that's the way I think I can make my emotions and my feeling of how it's being at a certain place coming through in my photography. So I believe this taking time is of the essence while at the scene, although it can be difficult, as I said earlier, especially on new locations.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Just taking that time to really immerse yourself in it and really look at what's going on around you and what you're naturally drawn to, because you naturally start to feel more. And I think the more time you spend and the more feeling you put into an image, then the viewer can feel that, because it's almost like an energetic imprint of what you were feeling in the moment.
Yeah, I like to think that at least. So that's at least my way of trying to make people understand how this place is and how I experienced it.
And I know minimal photography is one of your favourite things to photograph. So what do you think it is about minimalism that really interests you?
Well, I've shot a lot of different things, so not only minimalism, but the photos that maybe I'm the most satisfied with are rather minimal. So I'm not actually sure why, because I think it might have to do with this. When I'm in nature, very often I try to slow down. So when I try to slow down, I think I like images or frames that seems to be quite clear and expresses the essence of what I think is cool or interesting at that location. And to do that, I'm a little bit allergic to distractions. So I try to eliminate as many of the distractions as possible when I'm at the location. I don't like to remove very many things when in post-processing. So I try to do my best when I shoot things to just get rid of distractions by choosing another perspective or choosing another focal length or whatever is needed. So I think the images that I just like when it's clean. It expresses what I want to say in the cleanest possible way.
Yeah, and they say, don't they, that often the simplest of images are actually the most almost the most engaging, because it's very clear what the subject is, and they draw you in, don't they? When an image is quite minimal and almost simplistic in nature, it speaks to us in some way, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, at least to me. So I just love those kind of images. But I've also seen photographers who are extremely talented in creating fantastic images out of chaos, and at first sight it might look chaotic, but still there's some order in the chaos. So I really admire those people who can do that. And I try my best, but I think the best images that I make is quite clean.
It just shows that going back to, I guess, your interests and what really speaks to you is a really important message to people. It's like, you know, if you're really drawn to something, as you are with minimalism images, it's almost like that's where your essence is. That's what really speaks to you. And if we really hone in on that and really engage with what speaks to us, it's where our truest authentic images come from, than when we're trying to connect with things or create images that we just really struggle to connect with. And you can feel there, I think, with your minimalism, it's like minimalistic images speak to you, and when you engage in that style of photography, you can really be yourself, and as a result your images are so much better, as a result.
Yeah, I agree. But of course, you need to evolve as a photographer as well. And you said as well that your photography had changed quite a lot. So I like to challenge myself with new stuff. But at least at the moment, I really enjoy those scenes and working with this clean. I'm not sure it's right to call them minimalist, but they're quite clean at least.
And I know that you love to create this sense of calm in your images, and that plays very nicely, I guess, in with the more simplistic photographs. And do you think building this sense of calm into your images has come from the fact that you got really into photography during the stressful period you were going into, and it was giving you a sense of calm, so now you've almost transmuted that into the images that you're creating?
Yeah, that's a quite good way of putting it. At least I agree. I feel the same way myself. So, and often when I go out in nature, I feel calm. So that's the feeling or even the scenes I'm attracted to. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, of course, you can do things in post-processing, and you can do things with the colors and stuff like that to make things more harmonious. But at least when I'm out there, I think that's the feeling that's kicking in and make me choose the scenes that I do.
So do you do photography professionally, or is it what's your photography kind of set up there?
Well, I've been trying to do that a little bit. It was a little bad timing because it was just when the COVID hit. So I was trying to do some workshops, but it was effectively stopped by COVID. So now I'm in a full-time job and trying to spend as much time as I can with photography outside in my spare time.
It's lovely, I think, that you've got these kind of projects that you're working on, though. It's almost giving you something to work towards, doesn't it? In a sense that you can keep going with what you love, and these projects could evolve into something. Have you got any vision for these projects in the future? Anything you'd like to create out of them, or stories you'd like to tell?
Well, firstly, the thinking about these projects, or especially this Artwork of Nature project, has really made me develop quite a lot as a photographer, because I feel I can express myself much better if I have some constraints. So if I'm totally open to anything everywhere, I'm not that good. But if I can put some constraints or some context of what I'm doing, it's easier for me to explore these places and create different types of images. I can create some dark and gloomy images, which I've done, because it's quite interesting at these places. You can find these totally beautiful shapes and color combinations and everything, and just around the corner there's something totally spooky and gloomy. So I like this duality, and so working constantly with a project like that has given me a way to improve my photography by looking at similar scenes with different perspectives. And my vision for this project, well, I'm not sure. I've been thinking about the book at some time, but we'll see. I also like to have some kind of small projects when I'm photographing locally, for example ice and stuff like that, some small ice details. So I have a lot of small projects and a few bigger ones.
It's lovely to have that, though. I guess it keeps you going and keeps things fresh and gives you ideas. And I love the fact that you're considering potentially making a book in the future, because it consolidates everything together and gives you a visual representation of everything that you've created over the however many months or years that you've been undertaking those projects. And you've mentioned a couple of times that you photograph both locally and travel a little bit. So do you have a preference? Do you enjoy your local areas just as much of those travel moments, or are you more into the traveling?
What should I say to that? I think if I can create images that I really love locally, that's fantastic, because it can be challenging, because in the areas that I live there's no fantastic potholes and rock structures and everything. It's quite ordinary nature. It's beautiful, but it's not spectacular. So if I can create wonderful images, or images that I'm pleased with locally, that would be perfect. And I have some photos created locally that I really like. But I also like traveling, especially when I have this project, because then I'm tuned into this special geological areas in Norway. So I've been traveling a lot in Norway. So I really enjoy that as well.
I guess it makes sense when what you're most interested in isn't within your local area, it's somewhere else, and to go away and connect with that really fuels that passion for you and allows you to really connect with the things that really speak to you.
Yeah, that's true. And also when I come back from these trips, I'm a little bit more energized, and I have got some new inspiration, and then when I go out locally I might find something cool. So I think I need both.
It's good to be aware of what your personal preferences are, 100%. And that's one thing I realise as well. I mean, I don't do much travelling at all now for photography, but if I go away for a trip, or even somewhere even locally that's, a couple of hours drive away, it refuels that inspiration, and you come back with new ideas and things. And that's one thing. We've got an online community as part of Photographic Connections, and that's one thing we did in September, was encourage people to change their perspective by going somewhere new or photographing something new, whether that was somewhere locally or to physically go somewhere new. But it was interesting to see how that perspective was changed for some people, how they found, as you rightly said there, new inspiration. And I love that you've just shared that, because sometimes people get in this creative rut and they don't really know how to get out of it. And it can sometimes be as simple as photographing something you've never photographed before, or going somewhere that interests you, or somewhere completely different, and just seeing what that sparks within you. And it sounds like that's definitely been your experience.
Yeah, that's very true. And I've also had, if I go too long and only shoot the same things, I stop getting interested. So I need to fill on with some new inspiration.
Yeah, definitely. Brilliant. Well, it's been brilliant to speak to you today, Klaus. I think this idea of mindfulness and meditation and how photography can help us through some of our most stressful moments is a story that I'm hoping will be quite inspirational for some people. It's one thing I really wanted to do with this podcast, was to share stories that can really inspire people to hear the almost healing benefits that photography can bring us. And your story certainly echoes that. So thank you so much for sharing that with so much honesty today. And if anybody would like to connect with you further, where can they go to find you and your work?
Well, they can find me on my website, for example, axelsenphoto.com, or they can find me on Instagram, Klaus Axelsen PHOTO. That's my handle over there. So, they can also find me on Flickr if they want.
Fantastic. And I'd highly recommend anyone that's listening to this to go and see your imagery, because there's some absolutely beautiful photographs in there that really instill that sense of calm and peace and tranquility. And when you couple it with what you've shared today about, your panic attacks and the mindfulness element, you can really see how that plays into your imagery, which is beautiful. So yeah, have you got any final messages you'd like to share with everybody before we say goodbye?
Well, it was really nice that you had me on the podcast. It was really interesting talking to you about this, and I hope if there's somebody out there who are struggling with panic attacks, that they can find something that they're totally engaged in and get some relief, whether it's photography or just being outside.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Klaus, and thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this week's podcast. It really does mean the world to me. If you'd like to get further involved with Photographic Connections, including joining our online community, you can find all the details at our newly redesigned website, photographicconnections.com. And now that this podcast has come to an end, there's only one thing left for you to do. It's time to pick up your camera and head outdoors. There's so many incredible photographic opportunities just waiting for you to discover.